My wife claimed she was traveling for work almost every month, and for 15 years I never questioned a single trip because I trusted her completely. Then our 11-year-old son accidentally brought home an old-school photograph that changed everything. My wife was standing beside two children I had never seen before. On the back, someone had written, "Best family day ever, summer 2019." That was the exact week she told me she was attending a business conference. My name is Andrew Hall. I'm 39 years old and have worked as a structural engineer for nearly 16 years. My job often required long hours, weekend projects, and business travel. But every sacrifice felt worthwhile because I believed I was building a stable future for my wife, Rachel, and our son, Noah. Family always came before everything else in my life. Rachel and I met in college when we were both 21. She was intelligent, ambitious, and seemed capable of solving any problem calmly. We married 3 years later, bought a modest house, and welcomed Noah shortly afterward. From the outside, our life looked almost perfect. Friends often joked that we were the couple everyone secretly wanted to become. Rachel worked as a regional sales manager for a medical supply company. Her position required frequent travel, sometimes for 3 or 4 days at a time. She always returned with conference badges, hotel receipts, and small souvenirs for Noah. I never imagined any reason to doubt her because every trip appeared completely normal. Over the years, I became accustomed to managing the house whenever Rachel traveled. I packed Noah's lunches, drove him to school, attended parent meetings, and finished engineering reports late at night after he had gone to bed. It wasn't always easy, but I believed supporting my wife's career was simply part of being a good husband. Noah had recently started a family history project for school. His teacher asked students to collect old photographs showing important family memories. One Saturday afternoon, we opened several storage boxes in the attic, expecting to find vacation pictures, birthday parties, and holiday celebrations. Instead, we discovered something neither of us could explain. Hidden inside an old photo album was a loose picture that clearly didn't belong with the others. Rachel stood smiling beside 2 young children and an unfamiliar man outside an elementary school. Everyone looked comfortable together, almost as though they had posed for dozens of family photographs before that day. I had never seen any of them. At first, I assumed the children belonged to coworkers or distant relatives. Then I turned the photograph over. Written neatly in blue ink were the words, "Best family day ever, summer 2019. My stomach tightened immediately because I remembered exactly where Rachel claimed she had been during that week. Summer of 2019 had been especially difficult for our family. Noah broke his arm riding his bicycle while Rachel was supposedly attending a week-long conference in Denver. I spent 3 nights sleeping beside his hospital bed. Rachel called every evening, apologizing that work prevented her from returning home earlier. The more I studied the photograph, the more details disturbed me. Rachel wasn't wearing business clothes or a conference badge. Instead, she wore casual jeans, sunglasses, and a baseball cap. The children hugged her naturally, and the man rested his hand gently against her back. Nothing about the picture looked accidental or professional. I quietly slipped the photograph into my desk drawer without mentioning it to Noah. I didn't want him worrying over something that might have an innocent explanation. Deep down, however, I already knew my life had changed. For the first time in 15 years, I found myself questioning whether I truly knew my own wife. When Rachel returned home from work that evening, she seemed completely relaxed. She kissed Noah goodnight, asked about his homework, and smiled while telling me about an upcoming business meeting scheduled for the following month. I watched her carefully, wondering how someone could appear so calm while unknowingly hiding a secret photograph upstairs. After dinner, I casually mentioned finding old family albums in the attic. Rachel smiled for a brief moment before asking exactly which boxes we had opened. It wasn't the question itself that concerned me. It was how quickly her expression changed from relaxed curiosity to nervous attention before I even answered. I deliberately avoided mentioning the mysterious photograph. Instead, I said we mostly found vacation pictures and Noah's baby photos. Rachel visibly relaxed, laughed, and suggested we organize everything into newer albums someday. Watching that tension disappear from her face convinced me the photograph meant far more than she wanted anyone to know. Later that night, after Rachel fell asleep, I removed the photograph from my desk and examined it under brighter light. In the lower right corner was a small school logo I had overlooked before. Beneath it appeared the school's full name and city. The location wasn't Denver. It was nearly 300 miles away in a town Rachel had never once mentioned to me. The next morning, I searched for the school's name online before leaving for work. It was a private elementary school located in a quiet suburban town nearly 300 miles away. According to the calendar, their annual family day had taken place on the exact date written on the back of the photograph. Rachel had supposedly been attending a medical conference that same week. I opened my email archives and searched for Rachel's travel confirmations from 2019. I quickly found the reservation she had forwarded years earlier. Something immediately caught my attention. The hotel confirmation looked genuine, but there was no airline ticket, conference registration, or expense reimbursement attached. Rachel had always kept those documents together. For the rest of the day, I couldn't focus on engineering drawings or project meetings. Every memory from that summer replayed inside my head. Noah crying in the hospital. Rachel apologizing over the phone because work supposedly kept her away. At the time, I believed every word. Now I wasn't certain any of it had been true. That evening, I quietly asked Rachel whether she still stayed in touch with anyone from the Denver conference. She barely looked up from her phone before answering, "Not really. Everyone moved to different companies." Her response came so quickly it sounded rehearsed. She never asked why I suddenly cared about a meeting that happened years ago. The following afternoon, I called the conference center listed on Rachel's old reservation. After explaining that I needed to verify attendance records for an insurance matter, the receptionist searched their archives. A few moments later, she apologized and said no medical conference matching those dates had ever been held at their facility. I thanked her politely and ended the call, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Either the receptionist had made a mistake, or Rachel had lied about the entire trip. I desperately wanted another explanation, because accepting the truth felt almost impossible after 15 years of marriage built on what I believed was complete trust. Instead of confronting Rachel immediately, I decided to gather facts first. If there was an innocent explanation, I wanted to hear it. If there wasn't, I needed undeniable proof before turning my family's life upside down. Guessing or accusing without evidence would only create more damage, especially for Noah. A week later, Rachel left for another 3-day business trip. She kissed Noah goodbye, loaded her suitcase into the car, and promised she'd call every evening. 20 minutes after she drove away, I checked our shared location app. Her phone wasn't traveling toward the airport, it was heading in the opposite direction. I waited another hour before opening my laptop and reviewing our joint credit card account. Rachel had charged fuel at a highway service station instead of the airport parking garage she normally used. Then another payment appeared at a small cafe located in the same town printed on the back of the mysterious photograph. That single transaction changed everything. It meant Rachel hadn't accidentally visited that town years ago. She was still going there. I zoomed in on the map, staring at the familiar street names surrounding the cafe. Whatever secret existed there wasn't part of the past. It was still happening while I sat at home believing she was away on business. I considered driving there immediately, but emotion is a terrible guide when someone's entire life might be falling apart. Instead, I saved screenshots of every transaction, downloaded copies of our statements, and wrote down the exact times. If I confronted Rachel later, I wanted facts she couldn't dismiss as misunderstandings or faulty memories. That evening, Rachel called exactly as she always did. She claimed she had just finished dinner with several co-workers and complained that the conference schedule was exhausting. While we talked, I quietly looked at the cafe receipt on my screen. It had been charged only 20 minutes before her call, nearly 300 miles away from where she claimed to be. When the conversation ended, I searched the cafe online. Dozens of customer photographs had been uploaded over the years. I wasn't expecting to find anything useful, but one image made my heart stop. In the background, sitting near the window, was a woman who looked exactly like Rachel, laughing with the same man from the old school photograph. The picture had been posted only 8 months earlier. I downloaded it and enlarged the image several times. The hairstyle, necklace, and wedding ring all matched Rachel's. Across the table, the man smiled while helping one of the same children cut a slice of cake. They looked completely comfortable together. I closed my laptop and sat alone in complete silence. Until that moment, I had hoped the photograph was somehow misleading. Now I knew there was only one way to learn the truth. The next time Rachel claimed she was leaving for another business trip, I wasn't going to stay home. I was going to follow her myself. 3 weeks later, Rachel announced another 4-day conference, this time in Chicago. She packed the same suitcase, printed another itinerary, and kissed Noah goodbye before leaving before sunrise. I waited 15 minutes, started my truck, and followed from a distance. Instead of driving toward the interstate leading to the airport, she took the familiar highway heading toward the same town. I stayed several cars behind, careful not to attract attention. Nearly 4 hours later, Rachel exited the highway and drove into a quiet residential neighborhood lined with small brick homes and tree-filled streets. She pulled into the driveway of a blue 2-story house. My heart pounded as I watched the front door slowly open. The same man from the photograph stepped outside smiling. Before I could even process what I was seeing, 2 children ran across the front yard shouting Rachel's name. She hugged both of them tightly before embracing the man as though they had repeated that routine hundreds of times. Nothing about the scene looked unusual to any of them. I remained parked half a block away for almost an hour. The children laughed while Rachel helped carry grocery bags inside. A neighbor walked over, waved, and greeted her warmly. Whatever was happening here wasn't secret to the people living nearby. To them, Rachel appeared to be a normal member of the neighborhood. Instead of confronting anyone, I quietly left. My emotions were too overwhelming to think clearly. On the drive home, I kept replaying the image of Rachel hugging those children. She looked exactly the way she looked with Noah. Loving, comfortable, completely at home. I no longer doubted she had another life. I just didn't understand how it was possible. The following morning, I hired a licensed private investigator named Laura Mitchell. I handed her copies of the photograph, credit card statements, and the address I had followed Rachel to. Laura listened carefully before making one promise. She wouldn't speculate. She would only bring back facts supported by evidence. 5 days later, Laura called asking to meet in person instead of discussing her findings over the phone. The moment I entered her office, I knew the situation was worse than I imagined. Several thick folders covered her desk. She quietly admitted she had never handled a case quite like this before. Laura's investigation confirmed Rachel had regularly visited the Blue House for almost 8 years. She wasn't staying in hotels during many of her supposed business trips. She spent entire weekends at that address. Neighbors consistently referred to her as Mrs. Lawson and believed she lived there whenever work allowed. Then Laura handed me copies of public property records. The house wasn't owned by Rachel or Eric Lawson. It was rented under a limited liability company created 6 years earlier. The registered manager listed on the paperwork wasn't Rachel. It was a name I had never seen before, making the situation even more confusing. Next came photographs taken over several weeks. Rachel attended school events, birthday parties, and neighborhood barbecues with Eric and the 2 children. They celebrated holidays together and even attended church on Sunday mornings. Looking through the pictures felt like watching someone else's wife living someone else's life. I finally asked the question I had feared since finding the school photograph. "Are those children hers?" Laura paused before answering carefully. She had confirmed Rachel acted like their mother, but official birth records listed another woman. That woman had passed away nearly 9 years earlier after a long illness. That answer only created more questions. If Rachel wasn't their biological mother, why did everyone believe she was? Why had she hidden them from me for nearly a decade? And why had she built an entirely separate identity instead of simply telling the truth about helping a widowed family? Laura wasn't finished. She slid one final folder across the desk. Inside were bank records legally obtained through public business filings. Rachel had been making regular transfers into the LLC that paid rent for the Blue House. The payments continued every month regardless of whether she claimed to be traveling for work. The total amount transferred over 8 years exceeded $300,000. Some of that money came directly from Rachel's personal income. Other payments originated from our joint household account. For the first time, I realized this wasn't only about lies. Our family's finances had been supporting a second household without my knowledge. Before I left, Laura quietly said something that stopped me at the office door. "Andrew, I spoke with Eric Lawson yesterday." I turned around in disbelief. She looked me straight in the eyes before continuing. He believes Rachel is divorced. As far as he knows, you don't exist. For nearly a minute, I couldn't say a single word. I had spent weeks believing Eric Lawson was knowingly helping my wife betray our family. Now I discovered he had been living inside the same lie. According to Laura, Rachel told him she had divorced years earlier after escaping an unhappy marriage. He believed every word because she had created an entire history to support the story. Laura explained that Eric had shown her framed photographs dating back almost 8 years. Rachel appeared in birthdays, holidays, school performances, and neighborhood events. She celebrated Christmas in that house, attended parent-teacher conferences, and even volunteered at school fundraisers. Everyone in the community believed she was simply rebuilding her life after a painful divorce. I asked whether Eric knew about Noah. Laura slowly shook her head. She said Rachel had never mentioned another child. As far as Eric understood, she couldn't have children and devoted herself to helping raise his son and daughter after their mother passed away. Hearing that made me realize Rachel had been lying to both families from the very beginning. For the next several days, I barely slept. Every memory from the past 8 years felt different now. Business trips, missed birthdays, canceled vacations, and lonely weekends suddenly formed a pattern I had never noticed before. Rachel hadn't been choosing work over our family. She had been dividing her life between two completely separate worlds. Instead of confronting Rachel emotionally, I contacted a family law attorney named Daniel Brooks. After reviewing Laura's evidence, he advised me to remain calm and continue collecting proof. He explained that financial records, property documents, and Rachel's false statements could become extremely important if the situation eventually reached divorce court. Daniel also recommended something I hadn't considered. He suggested tracing every transfer from our joint accounts during the previous 8 years. If marital funds had been used to support another household without my knowledge, the court would likely want a complete accounting of where every dollar had gone. A forensic accountant spent 2 weeks reviewing our financial history. The results were devastating. More than $300,000 had quietly disappeared through dozens of small transfers that never seemed suspicious individually. Some payments covered rent, utilities, school tuition, and medical insurance connected to the second household. The accountant pointed out something even more troubling. Rachel intentionally kept every transfer below the amount that would normally trigger automatic bank notifications. She understood exactly how to move money without attracting attention. This wasn't impulsive behavior. It required years of careful planning and consistent effort. Before taking legal action, I asked Daniel one important question. Should I tell Eric? He thought carefully before answering. Eventually, yes, but not until we have enough evidence that neither of you can be manipulated against the other. Rachel had successfully controlled 2 families for years. We couldn't allow her to do it again. A week later, Daniel arranged a private meeting at his office. Eric arrived looking confused and slightly nervous. The moment we saw each other, neither of us spoke. We simply stared across the conference table, realizing we had both unknowingly built our lives around the same person while believing completely different versions of the truth. Daniel carefully presented the evidence without accusing anyone. First came my marriage certificate, then photographs of Noah. Finally, Rachel's travel records and financial statements. Eric's face slowly turned pale as he realized Rachel had been legally married to me the entire time she claimed to be divorced. When Daniel finished speaking, Eric quietly removed his wallet and placed several family photographs on the table. Every picture showed Rachel smiling beside him and the 2 children, exactly as though they were a normal family. Looking at those photos, I realized he wasn't my enemy. He had been deceived just as completely as I had. Eric admitted Rachel always explained her frequent absences by saying her company constantly sent her to regional offices across the state. Whenever she stayed with me and Noah, he believed she was attending work conferences. She had created opposite stories for each household, allowing both families to unknowingly cover for the other. For several hours, Eric and I compared dates, holidays, and family events. Every missing weekend in one family matched an important celebration in the other. Rachel had maintained 2 completely different calendars for almost 8 years without either of us discovering the pattern until now. Before leaving Daniel's office, Eric looked directly at me and quietly said, "I don't want revenge. I just want the truth, and I want all 3 children protected from whatever happens next." I nodded in agreement. For the first time since finding the photograph, I realized this wasn't going to be a fight between 2 men. It was going to be both of us facing the same deception together. Over the next several days, our attorneys coordinated every step. Neither Eric nor I contacted Rachel. We wanted the truth to come from evidence instead of arguments. Phone records, financial statements, travel receipts, and photographs painted the same picture. Rachel hadn't made one terrible mistake. She had carefully maintained 2 completely different lives for nearly 8 years. Daniel suggested filing for divorce before confronting Rachel. That way, important financial accounts could be protected before she had an opportunity to move money or destroy evidence. Eric's attorney followed the same advice. Neither of us wanted revenge. We simply wanted to prevent more lies from causing additional damage to our children. Rachel returned from her latest business trip on a quiet Sunday afternoon. She walked into our house carrying gifts for Noah and a small box of chocolates for me. She smiled exactly as she always had. Watching her act so naturally after everything I had learned felt almost unreal. I wondered how long she believed she could continue living 2 separate lives. That evening, after Noah went to bed, I asked Rachel to sit with me in the living room. I calmly placed the old school photograph on the coffee table. She looked at it for only a second before her expression changed completely. For the first time in 15 years, Rachel seemed genuinely frightened. Before she could invent another explanation, I placed several more items beside the photograph. Credit card statements, property records, travel histories. Finally, I laid down a recent picture showing her embracing Eric outside the blue house. Rachel stared silently at the evidence, realizing there was no believable story capable of explaining everything away. Rachel quietly whispered, "I can explain." I shook my head and answered, "Not tonight." Then I told her something she never expected to hear. "I've already met Eric." Her eyes widened immediately. The room fell completely silent as she realized the 2 men she had deceived for years had finally spoken to each other. For several moments, Rachel simply cried without saying anything. Eventually, she admitted the lies had become impossible to escape. She claimed she originally wanted only to help Eric after his wife passed away, but every lie required another lie until she found herself trapped between 2 families who trusted her completely. I listened without interrupting because I wanted the entire truth. Rachel confessed she had planned to end the second relationship several different times, but always convinced herself it would hurt too many people. Instead of making one painful decision, she chose years of deception that ultimately caused far greater damage to everyone involved. The following morning, Rachel moved into a temporary apartment while the divorce process officially began. We agreed that Noah would not hear adult accusations or legal arguments. Whatever mistakes Rachel had made as a wife, I refused to let our son become another victim of choices he never made. Eric reached a similar agreement regarding the 2 children he had been raising. Although Rachel wasn't their biological mother, they loved her deeply after so many years together. Both of us promised to keep the legal battle away from the children as much as possible. They deserved honesty, not endless conflict. During the financial investigation, the court ordered a complete review of Rachel's assets. Every hidden account, monthly transfer, and undisclosed payment eventually surfaced. The judge later commented that the deception wasn't limited to personal relationships. It involved years of deliberately concealing marital finances from both households. Several months later, the divorce became final. The court divided our remaining assets according to the evidence presented, including reimbursement for funds secretly taken from our shared accounts. It wasn't about winning money. It was about restoring fairness after nearly a decade of carefully hidden financial deception. About a year later, Eric and I met for coffee while our children played together at a nearby park. Watching them laugh reminded us why we had chosen cooperation instead of revenge. None of the children had created this situation, and they deserved adults willing to put their well-being ahead of anger. Looking back, the old school photograph didn't destroy my life. It revealed the truth before even more years disappeared. If Noah had never brought that picture home, I might still be believing every business trip and every carefully rehearsed explanation. Sometimes the smallest discovery changes the direction of an entire lifetime. If this story taught me anything, it's that trust should never be confused with blindness. Loving someone means believing in them, but it doesn't mean ignoring reality when facts begin telling a different story. The truth eventually finds its way into the light. Mine happened to arrive inside an old school photograph that my son almost threw away.